is Women in Chinese History. And if you're interested in any information more, then please go ahead, email me at pyo@calstatela.edu, and I hope the conversation can continue. Okay, so yin yang and perception of gender. Professor Wang talked about the idea of yin and yang as the basis of Chinese gender system, but I just want to add a little bit about why the kingship system in early imperial China is almost based on yin-yang concept. So I wanted to know if you heard of these, I'm sure you heard of these three terms: patriarchal, patrilineal, and patrilocal. And this is how Chinese society worked throughout Chinese history. So basically, man was always the head of the household, and women marry into man's husband's family, and children, descendants, come through male's line. So that's patrilineal, and marry into man's family will be patrilocal. So let me quickly go through that and talk about the changing ideal of femininity and womanly virtue. So what I really wanted to emphasize today is that even though when we talk about traditional Chinese gender system, I think in the West there's a misconception that thinking it was always the same throughout the Chinese history. Women were suppressed, they had a horrible life, and women had no voice. What I wanted to emphasize today is probably we shouldn't think that way. Things were always changing. Yin-yang probably could be, we can say it's a basic ideal, but throughout the Chinese history, we see differences dynasty by dynasty for different reasons. So let's take a look at the ideal of femininity and womenly virtue, see how that changed. Now, femininity in early Chinese literature, I give two examples here, and you can tell they contradict. If a woman is pretty, she probably, books would not talk about how smart she was. If it's a smart woman, she must be ugly. So on the left side, Zheng Lichun was a woman of the town of Wu Yan in the state of Qiyuan. She was an ugly person with no comparison, but she was really smart. So that's the early literature. And then the other side, on the right side, is from the Book of Songs. They talk about what kind of beauty early Chinese men appreciate the most. Her hands are like soft young shoots, and her skin is women's scent and everything. So in early literature, you could see the contrast of beautiful, but probably not smart. Smart, but ugly. That kind of femininity in early Chinese literature. However, you can see things changed dramatically 1,000 years later during the Tang Dynasty. The main reason for this kind of change is because the rise of the civil service examination. When literati became powerful and important in the power structure, so they wanted to add literacy, or intelligence as part of femininity, as part of ideal of femininity. So here are some examples of ideal femininity. So it talked about a beauty with holding a book, reading poems, and reciting poems, and even writing poems. On the right side, you can see the Tang Dynasty replica of Gu Kaizhi, his painting of a learned woman giving advice. So So that's a changing ideal, example of changing ideal of femininity and masculinity. Also, womanly virtue changed as well. We know that Confucianism was a dominant ideology throughout Chinese history, but we could also see that Buddhism, when Buddhism was introduced to China in the 2nd century, Buddhist woman was praised as virtuous woman as well. So here, this is from the epitaph of the Tang Dynasty talking about a virtuous woman who, because of her Buddhist tradition, she was so virtuous, almost as a saint, as a Confucian saint. So that was another sign of change. So we cannot say women's virtue or gender ideology never changed, right? This is another example of womanly virtue. Another change is that during the Tang Dynasty, for example, when civil service examination became so important, a woman's ability to teach their children to read and write became a virtue as well. So here is an example saying, the second paragraph, Mr. Yuan died early when Yuanji and Yuanzhen, the sons, were still young, and the family could not afford a teacher to educate the son. Thus, Lady Zhen, Yuanji and Yuanzhen's mother, held the books herself, teaching the brothers tirelessly. Within 4 to 5 years, Ji and Zhen acquired offices through their knowledge of the classics. So I'm gonna quickly go through this part because it's mostly charts and everything based on my research. Life course of Tang Dynasty women. I just want to talk a little bit about what I do with my research. My field is Tang Dynasty women. I collected 6,000 epitaphs from the Tang Dynasty. 1,500 of them were for women, 4,500 of them were for men. The epitaphs for men also talk about their wives, their mothers, their daughters, and everything. So I got some ideas from men's epitaphs as well. So based on these numbers, we can see some interesting statistics. For example, when men, this is the chart for men's age at death, we can see a very natural curve. But if you look at the women's age at death, what did you see? Women died of childbirth quite often throughout the Tang Dynasty. Okay. And also I want to mention here, you can see when the dynasty declined, women's lifespan was decreased as well. This is women's marriage age. The average age for Tang women's marriage, wedding was 17.1. For men, it was 21 years old. So here you can see somehow when the dynasty declined, private emotion was more important to family members. So they would mention children, they would mention daughters. Same here. And birth rates, for women, it was, I think it was about 5, and for men it was about 6. So take a guess why there's a big difference between men's children and number of men's children and number of women's children. The concubinage. So there's a proof that men have more than one wife, equal concubines. So marriage practices in Imperial China, Now, this is written in the meaning of marriage in the Book of Rights. It's not for your individual happiness. It is for the good of the two surnames that are joined. So it's for the worshiping ancestors and for continued ancestor lines. Now, however, what I wanted to emphasize is that when you arrange marriage for your children, Chinese parents usually took care of their emotion as well. It's not like you have to marry this guy and that's it. So I heard a lot of my students would say, oh, I don't want to live in ancient China. Parents want you to marry someone, you just have to marry someone. That's usually not absolutely true. Okay, so traditionally we follow what we call the 6 rituals written in the Book of Rites, composed during the Han Dynasty, which is the 3rd century BCE, 202 BCE to 220 CE. So first, we will hire a matchmaker to take a marriage proposal to the future bride's family. So that's first ritual. Second ritual is requesting birth dates. So why is requesting birth dates so important? You report back to your ancestors to see if they match. You do a divination at the ancestor shrine. So that's second. And then you presenting betrothal gifts and presenting wedding gifts, and then you have wedding arrangement arranged by 2 families, and then wedding ceremony. So all these 6 rituals, only the last ritual had 2, the couple showed up. The previous 5 rituals, usually parents will say, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Without the couple, the young bride and the groom. But one thing I wanted to mention is presenting the gifts. The gifts are not like cash or furniture or a house or car. It's usually food with interesting names. Because, for example, nuts. In Chinese, peanuts. 花生. Hua means berries. Sheng means give birth. So if you give presents, peanuts as a present, it means you can have a lot of children, right? So all presents have meanings because of the pronunciation, not because of the value of these presents, how expensive it is. So these are the rituals, all for the goodness of the 2 families and for passing along the family line. So what kind of various patterns of marriage did we have? Now, when they talk about patrilocal marriage, it sounds like you could only marry into man's family, but that was not always the case. Very often, actually, we have what we call local marriage when men marry into his wife's household. That happened most often in the cases when poor men had no money to take wives, or when an orphan had no parents and he would live with his uncles or any relatives had a daughter. So then he would just marry his daughter and then live with her. So that's one type. The other type very often happened was cousin marriage. I think I have a phone here. So cousin marriages in Chinese history happened very, very often. That changed throughout Chinese history as well. So, for example, MBD is eagle marries mother's brother's daughter. Does that make sense? MPD, right? So that's cross-cousin marriage. So MZD would be ego, this means man, which is not very sexist term, in my opinion. So a man marries his mother's sister's daughter. So that's two sisters' children marry each other, so we call it parallel cousin marriage. And then a third type would be this man marries his father's sister's daughter or his father's brother's daughter. So 4 types of marriage, cousin marriages. In Chinese history, 2 things are very interesting. First of all, FBD never happened because there's a very strict rule that you don't marry someone with your same last name, no matter how distant you are. So for the 6,000 FTFs that I saw, not one single person married someone who had the same last name. It was very strict. Secondly, MZD happened very often, which most societies never practiced. The Chinese probably was only one of 2 societies practiced MZD. But that happened only later on in the Ming Qing period, which is from the 14th century to 1911, not earlier period. The reason for that was when the Chinese women, the position of Chinese women declined, they want to make sure that their daughter would marry into a family that would treat her very well. So if you marry your daughter into, especially there was a tension between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, right? So if you have MPD, it doesn't sort of guarantee you your sister as your mother-in-law. So NZD became very common. But that was not the case before Ming Qing period because, for example, in the Tang Dynasty, women had a very high status. They did not worry about that too much. So in the Tang Dynasty, we do not see MZD as a popular form of marriage. So what is spirit marriage? It happens when, before they got married, the future groom died. So this woman would move into this future husband's house, serving as a daughter-in-law the rest of her life at her own will, not forced, just to show she was a loyal person. And then we also have another type of spiritual marriage, which means 2 people die before they get married, and the families would arrange them to bury together. We call it afterlife marriage, which is very common. I cannot say very common, but in the 6,000 epitaphs, I found 11 cases. That was common enough, in my opinion. Concubine age, I think you talked about it before, so I'm going to skip this one. One thing I wanted to emphasize is concubine age changed throughout Chinese history as well. For example, in the Tang Dynasty, concubine could never move up to the status of a wife. If the wife dies, then the man will take a wife from another prominent family. Concubines were from lower classes. But later on, in the Ming and the Qing dynasty, then concubines could move up if the first wife died. And as Susan May's book talked about, even in the Qing dynasty, it changed in the 17th, 18th century when government, the state decided commoners could not take a concubine if he did not reach the age of 40 or had a male child, that changed again. So even practice of concubinage changed as well. So here is, let me quickly skip this. Divorce law in Chinese history, even though this was looked very easy to divorce a woman, once you have one of the 7 grounds for divorcing a wife, but the divorce rate in Chinese history is extremely low. Okay, just like I have the 6,000 epitaphs I read, only one mentions man could not get along with his wife, and so he dumped her for whatever, one of the 7 reasons. Of course, no male heir, understandable. Adultery, understandable. Talkative, mostly this whole thing, 7 grounds was to make sure that a whole household, extended family can work, can function properly. Stealing really meant stealing the household's property, not someone else's. Okay? So it's all about household. And jealous means, jealousy, mainly you don't get jealous when the husband take a concubine or whatever. So, but there is a kind of obligations. The 3 obligations means once you marry a woman, fulfill this duty, you cannot divorce them. So there's certain protection. Cannot divorce them. So if the woman had no family, no place to return, if her parents died, then you cannot divorce her. And if she fulfilled the mourning period for parents-in-law, which means 3 years, then you cannot divorce her. Or if you were poor when you married, then you cannot divorce her and take a trophy wife. That's a problem. Okay, so courtesanship in Chinese history. That changed throughout Chinese history as well. Early on, courtesans were actually for military reasons, the earliest period. And then later on, in the Tang Dynasty, for example, you would have 5 types of courtesanship, plus when the dynasty was really rich and prosperous. So you had palace courtesans, government courtesans, which means the government assigned courtesans in local offices, regional offices. When the governor, for example, left the position, he was not allowed to take the concubines with them. The next governor got these courtesans. And then also household courtesans to show off your status, and then brothels. And that changed later on during the Ming and the Qing dynasty when the society became more commercialized. So the government would not have their own courtesans. Most courtesans were from brothels. So that changed as well. I think for binding, everybody heard of that as well. Originally, it was a practice among the dancers. In 9th and 10th century, it became really popular in the Song dynasty from the 10th century on among elite. But later on, it became a symbol of status if you have small feet. So that's the for-binding practice that I want to just quickly go through because I have a lot of pictures. One I wanted to show you about modern China. This is a picture of professional women needleworkers with all the small feet. The practice was banned in 1904. Well, it was not officially banned. It was the government decided it was a backwards practice. So in 1905, the government had a directive saying, "Don't force your daughters to have small feet." but it was officially banned in 1949, where the Communist Party took over. Completely banned. When I grew up, I still remember seeing small feet ladies walking on Woody. My grandmother, for example, my father's mother had a small feet originally, but after 1900, and she was born in 1900. After 1905, the parents decided, oh, let her grow her own feet. So she had a naturalized feet, what they call it. And my mother's mother was a maid, so she had big feet. She worked in a household as a maid. So that it was a symbol of status. Let me quickly go through another topic, because I'm kind of running out of time. Women in Chinese religion. This is a really interesting observation by Anne Burrell, because if you're interested in Chinese mythology, you find really powerful gods were female. They're useful gods. Okay, so here are some of them. The creator of our civilization in Chinese mythology, or the universe, was a female in Chinese mythology. And then weaver maid. We have Chinese Valentine's Day, which is the 7th day of the 7th month of a lunar year, and we celebrate weaver maid because she was a symbol of love, determination. And then Queen Mother of the West, who lived forever, who knew everything about sex, and a lot of interesting stories as well. I think you all heard of her as well. Women in Chinese Buddhist tradition. The next two slides, several slides I wanted to show is that women played an important role in spreading religion. In Chinese, this is actually my research topic when I was in China for the past 6 months, because we talked about the signification of Buddhism in Chinese history. We only talked about 4 Chinese Buddhist schools created by Chinese men, but that's not really the complete story. Women played an extremely important role in spreading Buddhist teaching because they were the people who in a household to teach their kids. So I found many epitaphs from the Tang Dynasty talking about how women taught their children to read Buddhist sutras. And then women, especially daughters, expressed their filial piety through donating objects on behalf of their parents. And I found a very interesting phenomenon in the Tang Dynasty, that is very close relationship between daughter and a mother in Buddhist tradition. And it's not talked about in other scholarship about Chinese Buddhism. And women's role in Chinese Taoist tradition, throughout the Chinese history, women played or served 5 roles. Women in Taoist texts were described as image of mother, is a mother gave birth. So women gave birth, a mother gave birth to the universe. So women was important. Women represented an in-force. Women were transmitter. Okay, so it should be transmitter and teachers of sacred texts. Women were religious leaders, many stories, and women also were vessels of transcendence. Women as a body, as an in-force, through some rituals, you can become immortals. So women were very important in Taoist tradition. There's of course a competition between scholars of Buddhist tradition and scholars of Taoist tradition, saying, okay, in Taoism, women could reach to the highest official rank in Taoist tradition, but not Buddhism. So, okay, finally, I want to use 5 minutes or so to go through images of modern Chinese women. Women were sexualized in the first half of the 20th century as Western culture influenced China. Women were used in commercials as a symbol of modernization, as a symbol of family, Western families. Here, women as a symbol of modernization. New motherhood. Now we talk about nuclear families instead of extended household. Fact, you have now curly hair. You have social life now instead of previously she should stay behind in the inner corner. Women were used in a lot of products that was never happened previously. All these were commercials after 1900 and before 1949, these images. Cosmetics, beer. This is some chemical products for household, jewelry, food store, even tobacco, homeowners insurance, fabric from India actually, and now even worse, pharmacy. But that happened in contemporary China when China reopened its door. Now, do you recognize this actress? Only very famous actress only. For Western product. Another image, 2 images of her, I think, being very much sexualized. However, women in Chinese posters during the PRC period, it was more about propaganda, serving the country's need, party's need, but also gender identity was sort of concealed, blurred. Okay? You can see the pictures of women being called Iron Girl, working on a electricity tower. Mostly you cannot really tell whether this is a girl or a boy or men or women because they wear men's clothes with no physical feature clearly visible. This is a shopping after a good harvest. Even though the fabrics they liked very much, you had the flower patterns, but what they were not flower pattern clothes. This is images of girls being educated, came home to teach their family members. Female workers showing her factory to, now what about the people surrounding her? There's a one, I think, okay, she is the worker, right, here. What about the people surrounding her? Who are these people? Minority, yeah, they are ethnic minorities. The picture served many purposes. One was to show the unity of all ethnic minorities under the Communist Party. Secondly, actually, the painter, the artist, wanted to give some colors. During the Cultural Revolution, I was in the dance team. We always had a performance about ethnic minorities. Mainly, we wanted to show some colors and wear skirts. That was the only chance we wear skirts. Okay, attending congregation of model workers. chapter 21. Now, women were responsible for taking care of family, even though it's under PRC. After these images are from the Cultural Revolution, you really, it's even further blurred when it comes to gender and sexuality. Okay, the first, here, she is, you can tell kind of, yeah, she's a girl, but, you know, this is about art. This is about spreading Chinese revolutionary art to the countryside. The Sanjidan Youth, that happened after 1969, when Chairman Mao said every people should be re-educated once they graduate from high school. So I was one of the Sanjidan youths to be re-educated, and I lived on the farm for 2 years. When the Cultural Revolution ended, I was able to take the college entrance exam. Robert Wang you met also when I was a Sanjidan for 6 years, being a farmer. So that's the Sanjidan youth. Another reason actually for the Sanjidan youth was to get rid of the Red Guards during the Cultural Revolution when they were out of control, and also to reduce urban population. Because after 1949, the government encouraged women to give birth to more children. We wanted to learn from the Soviets. But the Soviets had huge land, and their population was in decline because of the World War II. It wasn't our problem, but Mao decided whatever Soviets did must be right. So we had a huge population problem. So the Sanjidan Youth was one way of kind of control urban population. So this is Sanjidan Youth. Now, Mao also said students who graduate from high schools or middle school have no actual knowledge. So when you need a university, you only need students from actual workers and the peasants. So here is a picture of a rural university, and only the peasants were experienced enough to be a professor. Here, another example. Guy who was actually an intellectual with glasses, looking humbly toward this peasant, learning knowledge from him, right? So here are more images from the Cultural Revolution criticizing Deng Xiaoping. That's from the late 70s. So women were prominent in these images, but not prominent in their physical feature. After the Cultural Revolution, the government also used the women's image to attract the viewers to get the messages out. So here is a message of respecting science using a very fashionable girl's image. Support CCP's decision on suppressing Falun Gong, which is Buddhist sect, right? Also use beautiful girl's image, one-child policy, and then all the propaganda. Love our homeland, revolutionary tradition. These are all propagandas with a beautiful girl's image. This is a picture, a poster about the census, mostly about one-child policy. And the Chinese translation is, report your household numbers honestly, so we'll have a successful census. You see the family, one-child family, as a girl instead of boy, because in a lot of households, women, mothers of parents wanted to have an ultrasound to determine the gender of the baby, and then they might decide to abort the baby. So this is a kind of propaganda for two purposes. One is census, the other is one-child policy. Now this is the final image for World Expo. You can see a woman now is finally modernized according to current government's thinking for how to attract viewers and get messages out. This is World Expo, happened 2 years ago. So I'm gonna quickly end here. Thank you.